Hello, folks. Welcome to the 37th episode of the Superhero Ethics Podcast. My name is Matthew Westfox. I'm one of your hosts. And today we've got something really special going on. We have Matt Carroll, who is one of the co-hosts of the MCUcast, the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast, which is one of the first podcasts I listened to and really got me inspired to start this podcast myself. He's going to be joining us today for a discussion about one of the most interesting characters in the MCU, Tony Stark. So, Matt, how you doing today?
Hey, Matthew. Thank you so much for having me. It truly is an honor. I've been enjoying your cast.
Awesome.
And you guys, it's really feels great to say that we helped inspire it in some small way, because you really do tackle much bigger issues on your show than we do. We're a lot more focused on the cinematic universe itself. And we talk about, those bigger issues, but it's more in the mind of, in that fanboy way of like, what's going to happen next? Instead of like, what does it mean to my personal, my own personal ethics?
Well, and
I love that.
I got to say, I really appreciate hearing that, but I also think we need both, because I know there are times when I get off finishing this podcast and I've dived deep into Captain America and his ethics and his politics, and I just want to talk about how cool the fight scenes were. That's why I love you guys too. So I think it's a real value for both, and I'm really glad we're going to get the two of us together for this conversation. So
yeah, man, excited to be here.
Cool. Well, let's dive right into it. We picked Tony Stark because I think Tony Stark is probably one of the richest characters in the entire MCU in terms of just all the questions he raises and good and bad and all this kind of stuff. And so let me just start with, like, what's your kind of general impression of Tony Stark in terms of, like, is he a hero? Is he an anti-hero? Is he a some kind of he's gone on a journey? Like, where do you see Tony Stark?
Well, he's definitely gone on a journey. And you can really look at the entire scope of what he's done. He was a playboy with no. He has an assumption that everything he's doing is good, and I think that is like a big part of him that has never stopped. He always has this assumption until Ultron. Mm-hmm. He had this assumption that everything he was doing was good. He had this family who was running this weapons company, and he just assumed that he is so confident in that first scene of the first movie. He's so confident standing in front of that bomb that's being dropped, and he's like, look what we do, that we're protecting America with these bombs. We're building war machines, but it's for America, and we're proud to do what we do. And then he continues to do that, and then even then he realizes his company's wrong, and he builds Iron Man, and he kind of loses the idea. He becomes a little disillusioned with the idea that other people being involved in his decision-making are good. So then he builds this whole Iron Man program, but he's very much holds it in his own hands as if he is the arbiter of what is good and bad, and him having the final decision-making power somehow makes it ethical. And then
I think that's a great point, because he starts to challenge the idea of his own confidence, but really at first it's just his confidence in others. He is still convinced that if he puts on the suit, he can do no wrong.
Oh yeah, for sure. He's disillusioned with others, but then for all the way through, Iron Man 2, Avengers, and Iron Man 3, he is still fully convinced that everything he's doing is right.
Right.
Then there's an interesting turn in Avengers into Iron Man 3. It's not so much an ethical turn as it is a confidence turn. He starts to doubt himself, but still not doubting that he would do the right thing. He's doubting his own ability to face what's out there. Once he goes through the portal in Avengers and sees the bigger world, sees the bigger universe and the things he is going to have to face, he goes through a crisis of confidence, but still all the while knowing that he's doing the right thing. It isn't until he almost destroys the planet in Age of Ultron with his inventions that were all well-meaning. It's then he finally goes, you know what? Maybe even I, as perfect as I am, need a check on my own power.
Yeah, I think it's a great way of looking at it. And there's been a real great evolution. And it's one of the reasons I'm really excited to see, for Infinity War, is to see what's now, where is Tony Stark going to be now? Because he's had so many of these things that you would think would shake his confidence. They never have. Ultron comes along. And then even after Ultron, he goes ahead and builds Vision, which turns out to be a good thing. But I remember watching that and thinking, wait a minute. Has any lesson been learned here yet?
Right. And this is bad as the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast guy. I'm trying to piece together the exact thing that they did with Vision. Yeah, him and Banner both still want to they want to start up Vision,
right?
And with
it's with that body that the scientist had made originally.
The body for Ultron. The body was from Ultron, but the mind is the mind of his AI that he's been using for years.
Right.
Who he sees as working against Ultron in the code, so he thinks it's a safe bet. But obviously all the Avengers are against him, and it isn't until Thor walks in the room. It's such a weird alchemy. It's like it feels like an 80s Weird Science. It feels like Weird Science.
I remember that movie.
When you put two clamps on a Barbie doll and somehow it grows into a real woman. It's you put a computer code through a Barbie doll and it turns into a real woman. It's like they had there's always lightning involved, and with this one you had Thor comes in the room and like he sends his own Thor lightning through this body, which also has an Infinity Stone in it and also has all this vibranium and has the programming composer. It's like all this alchemy comes together to create Vision. It's such a cool
I gotta say it's
circumstance.
It's one thing I've always kind of liked about the MCU is that it tries a little bit to be grounded and a little bit to give you the pseudoscience, but on some level it just says, look, Thor's got a hammer. Who knows how it works? It's awesome. Enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't worry too much about the technobabble, and they just say, "Oh, if you don't understand it, it's just you can call it magic, but it's just science you don't understand."
Exactly.
Exactly. It's fun.
So with all that, like, where on his journey do you see him as? Do you still think of him as a hero? Do you think of him as an anti-hero? Do you think of him as something else? Like, where does Tony Stark Iron Man fit at this point? Given that he's done a lot of good and he's also done an awful lot of harm.
I think he is a cocky hero.
Yeah.
He's a hero. He genuinely wants to do the right thing, and in many ways he has. But one of his biggest failings is his overconfidence in creating Ultron. That's really the only time he's made a huge mistake. There's been, you could say everything he's done has sort of been small. Every villain has sort of been on a small scale created by him. It's been his technology that he created. Right. Which, that's a whole other can of worms, but like, what technology do you create and how other people use it versus how you use it? He's the only one he trusts his technology in the hands of, because look at Iron Man 1, Ironmonger, as thin of a villain as he was, and as silly as it looked to have Obadiah Stane in that suit. He's using Stark tech to fight. To fight for evil. Right. And then you have in the next movie, the Birdman, Whiplash comes over and builds an entire army of Iron Man suits to fight Tony. And then you've got, it's in the third one, it's Extremis. It's still he solved the Extremis puzzle back when he was still in his Playboy days, and that's still Stark tech being used against the world. It was like, science is boundless. Discovery is always good. I want to push the boundaries, create new things, regardless of the consequences. Right. In many ways, he's like, I am the destroyer of worlds kind of thing. Like, I think that doesn't hit him until Ultron, but all the way through the first three, they're all his fault. Everything is kind of his fault.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point you make, because on the one hand, I think we can't, to invent something great, even if it could be used for something terrible, that's not necessarily the fault of the inventor. But with Tony Stark, there's an element to which he's going even further, where he's not even thinking about the consequences of, because it's that he has that confidence of, I have this suit, I'm going to use this suit for evil, so that's great. He's not asking himself, what if someone else gets their hands on this suit, that kind of thing.
Right.
And I like what you say about the cocky hero, because to me, I feel like more than anything, Iron Man seems like he is the one who probably needs the Avengers more than anyone, because I feel like Iron Man, we've seen, he does best when he has that team around him of other people who can say, whoa, slow down here, Tony. You're not quite, you're kind of going off the deep end or whatever. Does that seem accurate to you? That he's like, that confidence really gets kind of I'm trying to think of what the word, but it gets well balanced by being as part of the larger team instead of just off on his own.
Absolutely. I think Steve Rogers is the other side of his coin. And I think we're going to see, obviously we see him literally butt heads with him in Civil War. And I'm really, really excited to see. And we actually recorded an episode of MCUcast last night where we talked about this a lot. So,
Oh, nice.
So a little plug for that. That should be up today.
Cool.
By the time this comes out, I'm sure it'll be up.
Yeah.
But our news and feedback episode this week we talk a lot about what is going to happen to Tony Stark and what is it going to look like, Tony Stark and Steve's relationship in this new movie. Because I think, I mean, from the first Avengers, they've been standing up to each other, and there's a great exchange in Avengers where Steve Rogers looks at him and he says, "You're not the one to make the sacrifice play. You're not a hero. You're not the one to make the sacrifice play." Because that's who Steve Rogers is. Steve Rogers can't destroy the world with his powers. You know, he doesn't have the great power that Iron Man does. Iron Man in many ways is more powerful than him with his mind.
Yeah.
But Steve Rogers is the little pipsqueaky guy in the first that I almost cry every time I think about this scene. Even now, thinking about him getting misty-eyed when he dives on that grenade the little pipsqueak to save those, because he believes that's the best way he can help the war effort is to die so these other bigger guys can live to fight Hitler. Like, that's just such an amazing scene.
No, it is so beautiful, and I think it's part of why you referenced earlier when Tony Stark, the Iron Man, is the one to go up into the portal. Part of the reason why that scene means so much is because, we know that Captain America will make that sacrifice. There's no question there. We know that, Thor is going to make incredible sacrifices for his friends and for his community and all that. It's that it's Iron Man, because he's probably the last one you think of who's going to be willing to make that kind of sacrifice.
Absolutely. And he says in that same conversation, he says, "You wouldn't be the one to lay across barbed wire so you're to save your men or whatever." And he says, "No, I would just cut the wire." Like, he always thinks at that moment, he's still so cocky to think that not only is he making the right decision in his ethics, but also like that he can't do, he's never going to be in a situation that he can't think himself out of. And then in that moment where he has to, there's a nuclear bomb, like this force of power that he can't stop on Earth. And then he has to send it and look out into the universe at another unstoppable force that he doesn't see a way that he sees so far beyond his own control and power. It's in that moment where he finally goes, "Oh, maybe there's more to it than just me. Maybe I can't do this on my own." And that's what all Iron Man 3 is. He has all this post-traumatic stress from that moment. And man, he calls Pepper. That's another moment that always gets me, when he calls Pepper and she doesn't pick up, and he's flying off into the universe. Sure he's not going to make it back through that portal, and he just can't reach Pepper.
Oh, it's such a beautiful moment. Well,
it's so good.
And listening to you talk about this, it actually makes a connection for me that I haven't made before. But you're a big Star Trek fan as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm sure other people have made the Tony Stark, James Kirk connection, but as we're talking, I'm thinking I'd love to see Tony Stark take the Kobayashi Maru. Because I feel like he has that same attitude of Kirk has, that he can't accept the idea of a no-win scenario. Like you said, he's going to cut the barbed wire. He's always going to try and find something else to do.
Kirk has third way thinking, as they call it, and the same way with Tony. It's like the best Star Trek episodes are, you have an emotional response that is being portrayed by McCoy, and then you have a logical response to the situation, which is being portrayed by Spock. And Kirk is in the middle, and neither of those are right.
Yeah.
And he has to find the right solution, which is often using creativity to solve a third way. And I think it's a lot of problems in our culture, a lot of problems in everything. Like, people want to go all emotion or all logic, and it's neither one of those. And you have to blend those two things together to come up with solutions. From our political climate to everything else, it's just so many things are that way. And that's what I love about Star Trek, is it makes you look at those things and go, there's got to be a third way. There's got to be a way to blend these things together and make them work. And when Star Trek does it at its best, it does it in a way where you, as the viewer, cannot see what Kirk is going to do.
Yeah.
But when he does it, you're like, of course, that would work. And it's just, and then it challenges you to be creative in your own solutions, and I love that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point because it really gets you thinking, and in the same way I think some of the MCU stuff can, of like what you look at a solution and you think, okay, well, there's this way to do it or that way to. You look at a problem and there's this solution or that solution, and it's so easy for us to get into that. Okay, well, now I've got to think about this binary of one or the other instead of being able to step back and go, wait a minute, is there another way forward? Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's funny because actually just last night I recorded another episode on a very different subject, but the Avatar, The Last Airbender, the animated show, and that's not one I know as much, but I know my co-hosts were talking about that. One of the things they love about that is that so often, um, you know, characters get into a situation where it seems like you have to either surrender or fight to the death, and the characters are all about trying to find that third way.
Yeah, for sure.
Another example I think of with this is Doctor Strange. At the end where he realizes.
I was about to bring that up.
Yeah,
I love that ending.
Yeah, because he can't possibly physically overwhelm. What is Dormammu? Is that the
Dormammu? Yeah.
Dormammu. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, but he comes up with that third way, and that's something
so good. And it's this is another one. Like, there's so many moments in the MCU, and this is why I love the MCU so much. There's so many moments I can think of that just like they're so personal and amazing. And that one is super spoiler alerts for. I feel like not as many people saw that movie, so I feel like I spoiler alert it. But when he goes in and gets stuck in that time loop where he's dying over and over, that is classic, like Buddhist and Christian philosophy, like dying to yourself.
Yeah.
And he literally chooses to sacrifice his body as a never-ending death so that the rest of the world can live. Like that, and his whole arc up until now has been selfish. He came to save his own hands. Mm-hmm. But in lieu of doing that, he's chosen to save the world and willing to completely sacrifice his own life over and over and over, as long as it takes. And we don't know how long he was in that loop, but it looked like he died a lot of times.
Yeah.
And it's just like that was such an amazing way of showing like self-sacrifice and that sort of like.
Yeah, it's that third way thinking you were saying, of breaking out of this. So, and pulling it back to Tony, we started getting into the topic of Ultron, and I want to really dive in there, because I think he obviously feels guilt, but I'm wondering, kind of from an outside perspective, what level of responsibility do you think Tony holds for Ultron? And the in Civil War, there's that incredible scene where the mother comes up to him, and she clearly blames Tony for the death of her son, in Segovia. What do you think our take as the audience is? How much responsibility does Tony hold for what Ultron does?
I mean, in a like, well, there's two answers to that question. One sort of a theory. Mm-hmm. I would say in some ways 100%.
Yeah.
But there's a small theory that I feel like has to be mentioned here. In some ways, if Ultron is a pure invention of Tony Stark and he just did not do his due diligence to include those, what is it, Asimov's rules for robotics or whatever.
Yeah.
If he didn't do a good job of coding that in from the core, then that's kind of his fault. But what actually happens in the movie is the Mind Stone, which was sent from Thanos, actually infects his programming, and so you could make an argument that it's actually, and at the end of the movie, that's the movie that ends with Thanos walking up, grabbing the gauntlet and saying, I guess I have to do it myself.
Right. He can't keep using these pawns that he's used in other things.
And so so although part of I wish it were 100%.
Yeah.
And I think that would be more interesting for this ethical conversation. And I think Tony views it as 100%. I don't think Tony really understands the scope of what was going on, but Ultron in many ways was sent by Thanos.
Yeah.
And somehow programmed into the Mind Stone when he sent it with Loki in Avengers 1. He used somehow had it's like he had Ultron built into that Mind Stone when he sent it, which is interesting.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see if that's explored at all in Infinity War. I mean, we know Thanos is going to be doing a lot of like taunting and playing with our heroes. It'd be really interesting to hear if that comes up at all with Thanos talking to Tony.
It would be. I feel like in a last battle with Thanos, we have this Tony Stark who has not stopped second guessing himself since Sokovia, and then suddenly he finds out it wasn't his fault. Can you imagine the bravado he might just like snap back into when he's like, "Wait, that wasn't my fault. Oh, these years of questioning myself. I didn't do anything wrong. You were just being a dick, Thanos."
Yeah, and I could see that being a fun moment, but I actually kind of like, I feel like, again, here, the kind of the third way of, the way I would see it is, I mean, even if we go with this theory, which I think there's a lot of evidence for, but what happened is Thanos set a trap, knowing that some human, maybe he knew about Tony, maybe he didn't, but, he kind of set up this potential of, will some human be stupid and arrogant enough to, like, run with this trap that I've set?
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of responsibility on Thanos, to be sure, but it's also still on Tony for falling into that, because even because what Tony did was to say, I don't know what this is going to do. What the hell? Let's try it. What's the worst that can happen? And
Yeah.
We saw, like, he doesn't really actually think about what's that worst that can happen. And to me, I think you're right. It's not 100% responsibility, but there's still some of it that's on him.
No, yeah, for sure he didn't, like I said, he did not build into the core of his code. Is it Asimov? Am I right on that? Am I just like making that up?
Isaac
His
Asimov.
laws, Asimov, sorry.
Yeah.
His laws of robotics, where your first thing is no hurting humans.
Right.
And if that was at the core of his programming where it couldn't change, then, maybe maybe would have been better off.
I think if you put that in there, or also it's just that same issue we talked about before with building the suit. On some level, he thinks if I build the technology, I'm going to have full control of it, and it's never going to be out of my control. And he never actually asks himself, like, what is creating this sentient supercomputer robot? What would that do if it was out of my control? He never quite asks himself that.
Yeah, for sure.
To your mind, when you watched him then decide, okay, I'm going to go ahead and create Vision, did that feel like, okay, this is fundamentally different and this is okay? Or were you watching that at least a little bit worried, thinking, oh God, is this Tony doing it again?
Well, I mean, it's pretty telegraphed in that scene because everyone in the scene is telling him to stop. That they all think something is going to go wrong. So, I mean, I guess it's hard. It's really hard in that scene for me to not know that comics and know that this is Vision that I'm looking at.
Yeah, that's true.
It was really hard as a fan and as someone who'd just been doing the podcast and talking and seeing so much of what was coming. I kind of knew that this is Vision.
Yeah.
I didn't. It was hard to buy into even the characters talking about, this is trouble. Don't do it. I was sitting there. No, this is gonna be great. I did think maybe they're gonna have to fight him first, but that's just a trope. Like, a new hero's here. We have to fight him to show the audience his power level. Blah blah blah. And then he's on our side.
The Avengers can't be friends unless they've punched each other first. There's a real
that's right. That is
testosterone thing happening there.
Sometimes I want to punch you in your perfect teeth.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's actually a good perspective, because it's one that I'm here a little bit of a dirty casual, in that I know the MCU pretty much forward and backwards at this point, but I didn't come to it from reading the comic books. And I try. I'm always glad for your spoilers on the news episodes, because I really try hard not to see the previews and stuff like that. So going into it, I knew nothing about this Vision character. So for me, it was a real interesting moment of like, Tony, what are you doing here?
Right. Why are you building another thing? Yeah, and I'm as much as I'm real big into the cinematic universe, like you are. I actually don't know I don't know enough from comic books, but what I know is when something's coming, that we kind of just we just end up finding out about it through the podcast, because we're covering so much, talking about different things.
I mean, another episode that I plan to do at some point is just talking about how bad previews have gotten, and how annoyed I am, and how much previews spoil so much of the movie for us by now.
Oh yeah, I hate it so much.
Yeah, I mean, with some of these movies that are coming out, like Thor, the previews have me excited for sure, but I'm trying hard as I can to avoid all of the, like, look what pictures we saw on the set. That proves that this character is back, and that,
Yeah.
So yeah, different topic entirely.
Yeah, there's a bunch of, you may want to be careful with our cast we're about to drop today. There's some casting news about Avengers Infinity War.
Okay.
And there a lot of people are speculating pretty hard about what that means. It's all speculation, but
yeah.
it could mean some things.
Yeah. Well, I remember you guys got into that with Spider-Man, with how much and it was in part because you guys warned me. I never wound up watching the second or third previews for Spider-Man, because of just how much they spoiled it. Um, but yeah, different topic entirely. Um, and just kind of finishing up on Ultron, I remember watching it and thinking, and this is never going to make a good movie by any means, and so I'm glad they didn't do it. But I remember thinking, like, I could understand someone, say, trying to bring some kind of a lawsuit against Mr. Stark.
Oh,
Saying, like,
absolutely.
is there, like, yeah, maybe not criminal homicide, but, like, maybe some criminal negligence here. Um, and
Well, and in many ways, that's what the Sokovia Accords are.
yes,
It's hard because they know that these people just saved the world.
right,
So they literally just saved the world directly from, not from Ultron, but from Loki in Avengers 1.
yeah,
And so Avengers 2 is even though they almost destroy the world, it's like, are they a net gain or a net loss? And it's hard. It's actually a political argument. It's like a fair political argument to have.
yeah. I mean, and I think that's what, and that's actually a good segue, because next thing I want to talk about is his role in Civil War. Because one of the things that I love about Civil War is that it's one of the few movies I know of where people can come out of it arguing about who was the hero and who was the hero and who was the villain.
Absolutely.
In terms of, like, Team Cap, Team Cap, and Team Tony.
Yeah.
And obviously, and because I think it did such a good job of showing the two sides of that. And so what's your take on Tony's attitude during Civil War? Because obviously we've got someone who, he's really kind of personally scarred by both the Segovia, what he saw in the portal, and also just his own feelings of guilt.
Right.
And I think that there's a lot of real value in what he's feeling, and there's also a lot of him kind of projecting what he's feeling on everyone else. And so what's your take on Tony in his positions in Civil War?
I definitely, there's two major fights in that movie.
Yep.
And the first one, you can absolutely see Tony Stark's point of view. I mean, you can see his point of view in both fights, but you're almost on his side in that. I mean, Cap is wrong. Like, Tony is actually right in trying to stop him from going to the when they have the big airport fight.
Yeah.
Tony is actually right. His side is right. This is actually a trap.
Yeah.
They're going off half cocked, and without approval of the Sokovia Accords, and, like, they're actually wrong. There is no threat. Is it Zemo?
Yeah, Zemo.
Yeah, but Zemo has gone there and already actually killed all the super soldiers there. He killed them in their sleep, so there's no threat. The only threat is going there. And so if you really look at it that way, like, Tony is right from beginning to end. Even so you want to be on Cap's side, but if you look at it with the hindsight of the end of the movie, like, Tony was right.
Yeah.
But in the final fight, you have he is out for revenge.
Yeah.
And in that moment, he's a villain. Like, there's no he wants to kill the man who killed his mom, even though Bucky was brainwashed, had no choice, and he's not willing to have any sense of nuance.
Yeah.
In that moment, or any sense of, like, forgiveness. And he says, he's like, I don't care. He killed my mom. Like,
Yeah.
that's all. It's like, he killed my mom and I can't get over that. And that's not hero behavior.
Well, and it's funny because we were talking before about, like, that middle road between emotion and logic and finding the middle road. To me, that's a moment where Tony just lets himself go totally into his emotions. Because it's like,
Absolutely.
If he were to step back and think about this rationally, he can understand this isn't Bucky's fault anymore. That, some of the other things that he has seen of other people being brainwashed and the like. And this is a weird connection, but I think it applies. I've known a lot of people who worked in hospices and things like that. Where folks were dying, and they said that
Right.
And the people I knew did a lot, were like nurses or workers in those situations where they dealt a lot with the family. And one thing that they saw a lot was that people who had really kind of complicated relationships with the parents who died, and had like never really been able to process their own feelings, often wound up sort of, getting really emotionally or irrationally angry at the staff or at other siblings or other family members, because they had so many wrapped up feelings in their parents' death that they just didn't have a place to go with and so it just came out as this irrational anger at the first person they could see. And I sort of see that with Tony, that we've known all along he has this incredibly, especially because, we know he's this incredibly complicated relationship with his dad. We know almost nothing about his relationship with his mother. Presumably it was a much better relationship, but we know very little about it. And the fact that he doesn't say there, this guy, he killed my parents, he says he killed my mom. And it feels it's such this simplification of, I can't think rationally, I'm just lost in this emotion right now.
Absolutely. And I think we definitely get a sense of that in the very first scene in Civil War, where he's I guess the second scene, he's doing that, that therapy, that holographic therapy.
Yeah, that like holographic
session.
Crazy stuff, yeah.
We see just a moment of him with his mom and a moment of him with his dad, and there's like a real, you can really tell the difference. And you can tell his relationship with his mom is really good, and his relationship with his dad's like disappointment and all this stuff. And he just never has he never was able to resolve his feelings with his dad. And a lot of that's playing out now. We talk about Civil War, and I think that's very interesting. But a lot of that is now playing out in Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Oh yeah.
His daddy issues are now coming to roost in like how he treats Spider-Man. Peter Parker is now his surrogate son, and he's having to figure out how to be a father to this kid, a father to this fatherless kid who is definitely viewing him as that.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to me. I love that. That's not really so much an ethical thing, but it is. I mean, how to be a good dad.
It is one I want to go in. Spider-Man is actually the next thing I want to go into, but I want to just in depth with Civil War. So, in terms of where he is, in terms of like stopping Cap from the trap and then losing himself with Bucky, I totally agree with you there on the hero-villain evolution he goes through. But what about in terms of Sokovia Accords? Where do you see Tony in terms of his perspective of, being really afraid of the kind of things that it's almost seems like he kind of feels like he personally needs the Sokovia Accords. He needs someone reining him in. And now he's trying to say, but so if I need it, all of us need it.
Absolutely. And I think he's right. I think that is the ethical center of the Tony Stark character. He is a cocky hero who has learned his lesson about being so cocky.
Yeah.
And he sees other people going down the same road, and he's trying to teach them like, no, we all need oversight.
Yeah.
And I think like Civil War, as much as it's Cap's movie and he's the hero of it, I do think he's wrong. Even to the point that like the place that he insists they go, it just leads them to a trap that Zemo has set for them.
Yeah.
And that leads to this major fight between these characters, and he has to defend his friend against Tony because that's Zemo's plan. They literally play right into Zemo's hands.
Yeah.
And I mean, even the entire war itself, it's all just playing into Zemo's hands. And Cap could have.
No, and I think you're right there, and I'm sure I'm going to get yelled at for some people because I've been known as a Team Tony person on this podcast. And the first time we're diving deep onto it, apparently I have another Team Tony person here, and I will get some Team Cap representation. But
I can definitely argue the other side.
Yeah.
But I just think, given how it ends, it's so funny because you still end up feeling like Cap is right.
Yeah.
But because it's a Cap movie, but really the details bear out that Cap was wrong. In the way
I wound up coming down on it was sort of thinking like, and here again, like, we're never going to get this movie, but it's like Tony is right that we need some kind of oversight, we need some kind of accords, we need some group that's saying, if nothing else, a group that says, hey, wait a minute, was Scarlet Witch really ready to go out in the field yet? Did she need more training? Was Tony right to do Ultron? Like, we need some more of that kind of oversight. And I think Tony is right in saying we need something. I think Cap is right in then saying, okay, but the Sokovia Accords are terrible, and we can't have those. And kind of, what I would wish to see happen is Tony say we need something. Cap says, you're right, we need something, but not this. And then they spend 2 hours having a bureaucratic negotiation about what the Sokovia Accords actually should be.
I'm totally with you. Like, that's something they could do on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. pretty well. And they have done it a little bit on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., like discussing like what exactly they have to do with this character or that character and how the Sokovia Accords are going to work
right
in the context of certain things. Because Cap is definitely right. The whole point of the Avengers is you have this fast response team who goes into a situation that needs them.
Right.
And I get.
At the end of that first Avengers movie, we see the problem with the oversight with that group that was like, okay, yep, just go ahead and let New York die, and that's how we'll fix everything. You know?
Yeah, we'll fix everything by just nuking New York. Not like this all can't happen again, and the aliens aren't coming anyway.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the point Tony makes is Cap makes is that every political body you're going to put in control of us will all have their own agendas.
Yeah.
No matter what, they're going to have their agendas. And Cap still fully believes in his own agenda. Cap has not gone through the transformation that Tony has gone through. And maybe it's because Cap's a better person. Maybe it's because he's never had the power that, true power corrupts absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's like Tony has had absolute power to destroy the earth.
Yeah.
And he almost did it. And he blames himself for that. And Cap has never really had that happen. His only real problem is he's still where Tony was after Iron Man, at the beginning of Iron Man 1, when he realized his company was wrong.
Right.
Cap just in Cap 2 realized that the government could be wrong.
Right.
And was wrong, and he has kind of struck out on his own. And now we've got this whole Secret Avengers thing, and I don't know. It's still a great question. How much oversight is the right amount of oversight for these teams? Like, yeah. That's a really good ethical question.
and it's one that I think, it has obvious, as in our own world, we're talking about how much, if we think of the Avenger type people as law enforcement, basically, on some way,
or military.
Yeah. And we have those same debates in our own world about how much oversight do we have. And it's what I love about the movie Civil War is how much it's possible to walk out of it either just thinking Tony was right or Cap was right. But I think you're right that in reality, what the movie shows us is that they both have some really good points. And just they're not quite able to hear each other on those, and that's where we get the conflict. And that Zemo is so part of what I think is the tragedy of that movie is that Zemo realizes these two people aren't going to be able to talk out their problems. That if he puts a conflict between the two of them, they're going to wind up fighting it out, and that makes for a better movie than a bureaucratic negotiation. But it's sad because it's it's the trap that he sets for all of them.
Absolutely.
So let's I'm sure we'll keep going over that, but let's now dive into what you brought up in terms of Spider-Man. Because that was one of the other questions I wanted to bring up is, what do you think of his role in terms of being Spider-Man's mentor? Is this him kind of trying to sort of say, I have learned my lessons, I've really screwed up, I'm trying to make sure Spider-Man doesn't go down the same path? Is this more about just being a father figure? What do you see happening there?
It's really interesting, especially given the conversation we're having, because a lot of what happens in Homecoming is Peter Parker disobeys the protocols put in place to keep him in check.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of the movie is about, is him disobeying, and he turns off the training wheels protocol and goes out on missions that he's not approved to go out on. And he says, why can't you be just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man?
Right.
Why are you needing to go fight these big battles? And he does it anyway. And then in the end, when he does that, he saves the day, and Tony offers him a spot on the Avengers, which is and Happy is happy that he did that, even though it should be, for the place we know Tony is right now, it should be that's exactly what he should be mad at the kid for doing.
Yeah.
he's being a little too Tony Stark in that moment.
There was, because I think you're right. I think what Tony is trying to do is sort of impose his own version of Sokovia Accords on Spider-Man.
Which, that's another question. Why don't the Sokovia Accords apply to Spider-Man? They
Yeah.
should, and I think they do. And I think that's part of the reason that Tony is saying stay at street level, stay down low. We don't need you on these big global problems, because then you're gonna catch the attention of the Sokovia Accords and everything. I think he wants him to be just like a stop
Right.
muggers, be a Daredevil level hero
Which
or whatever.
which brings me into my whole other consistency problem of if he's down on the level of New York City superheroes, well, there's 4 others he could maybe hang out with.
Absolutely.
That's another Netflix versus everything else question.
Right. Well, I think we have it seems like in most of Homecoming he seemed like he was either in the suburbs.
Yeah.
Or he was actually in Washington for a lot of the movie.
Yeah.
Or he was downtown at Avengers Tower, getting ready to take down that plane or whatever. Yeah. So it seems like he was very in different part. He was not in Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah. Not in Hell's Kitchen
or Harlem.
Not Harlem. Yeah, he's in different parts of the city, but still, I just maybe get rid of Iron Fist, bring in Spiderman instead. But okay, that's my own dream.
Yeah, on our show we always talk about how much we would love more and more connection between the shows and the movies and the TVs. And like, I want Runaways that's about to come out to connect with Inhumans, that's going to connect to, okay, maybe not Inhumans, maybe not Iron Fist, but, all these shows that are so, I love that there's so many shows, and I love that they all have their different corners of the universe and they have their own stories and the way they tell them, but I wish they'd have a little more crossover.
I know.
It's hard to do it without it seeming just very forced sometimes, I think.
I know that there's a lot of legal stuff and actors' contracts, but I know there were moments during Civil War where I just kept wanting Matt Murdock to walk in and help do the legal stuff, or
right, exactly, and I think I'm really hoping that they will do some of that stuff as this all progresses.
Yeah, for sure.
They always say there's plans to do it, and the one big one that they ever did was the crossover in season 1 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. connecting to the movie, the second movie. And the problem with that was it caused them to. So that happened in episode 17, I believe. Mm-hmm. So they had to, knowing that the movie was landing on a certain date, they knew that 3 years in advance.
Yeah.
So, and they had this. So they had a goal they were aiming for 3 years in advance. That gives them very little flexibility.
Yeah.
If they had realized for their plot, oh, you know what? It'd be great if Hydra came in right at the mid-season finale. But you know what? That can't work. It has to be episode 17. So we've got to fill in 6 extra episodes or whatever. That's, I think, what really happened with that first season. And a lot of people complained about that first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., how boring it was.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it was they were waiting on the big reveal.
They were just kind of stalling time for a couple episodes there.
Yeah. And so since I've kind of understood that, I understand why they don't do more of that. Because movies are made on this huge scale of 3 and 4 years from the time they finish the script to the time the thing is in theaters. And TV shows are literally, they're changing things in the script week to week. And when you hit yourself to large tent poles like they do, and make your plot so dependent on those large tent poles, then you take away some of the power of TV, which is that ability to see a plot going somewhere and go, you know what? This actress is working out really well. We should keep her around. Or so I'm always reminded of did you watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Yeah, I love that show.
Spike was Spike.
Yeah, he was supposed to be a one-off. He was never supposed to stick around. Yeah,
he's supposed to be a one-off character, and they were just, you know what? We like him a lot. We're going to keep him around, and he became a series regular and a fan favorite. One of my favorites.
Oh yeah, I think easily one
all
of
the way
best.
all the way through the end of Angel. He's great. And that would have never happened if you have the same sort of you're locked into a certain thing happening at a certain time. Sometimes you don't have that same flexibility to think on your feet and just see something going well and decide it's because that happens. They come back toward the end, I think, of season 2. Spike and Drusilla come back into town, and you're like, oh, they're back.
Yeah.
So I'm sure sometime in that season, middle of writing the season, they're like, you know what? That episode was so good. Let's bring those actor and actress back. That's really cool.
And I think you're right. I think there's a level of which the perfect continuity world, which we all long for, is just going to be impossible in terms of budgets and schedules and directors and all that kind of stuff. But there's and bring it back to Tony Stark. To me, one of just the small moments that was just like, come on. Was at the end of Defenders when they're clearly setting up Misty Knight to get her arm. And they say, and by the way, the Danny Rand Foundation can help fund this. And I was just thinking, come on, people watching Netflix know that Tony Stark exists. Why can't that just be Tony Stark, It was a small little thing. And just one shout out I wish Tony had gotten.
Yeah,
but
that would have been cool if that was Stark Tech.
Yeah.
I like that. That is one thing. Like, Stark Tech should just be a thing. Like, why isn't Stark Tech in all the hospitals and in all
Yeah.
the whatever? Like that should absolutely be a thing. This, like, you're right. Misty Knight would be a perfect time for. He literally creates arms all the time on his
Yeah.
suits that
Exactly.
operate independently. It'd
Well,
be perfect.
And so pulling it back to what we were talking about before about with him and Spider-Man, with Tony. So
I'm sorry, I get off on so many offshoots.
No,
talking about these shows,
trust me,
those movies. I can go every direction.
I love it too, man. The tangents, I think, are half of what people listen to. At least I hope, 'cause we have them a lot. But with Spider-Man, so because I hadn't really thought about it before, but I think the point you're making about him being kind of a father figure to Spider-Man is right. And I think on some level, definitely that's what Spider-Man does need, that, whether he wants to acknowledge it or not. But to what extent do you think Tony needs it? Because I'm thinking of Tony at this point, like,
I think, yeah.
He's kind of lost Pepper. Maybe he's gotten her back. It's not clear. He certainly lost a lot of what he had with the Avengers. Tony in that movie seems like someone who he kind of needs something now, because
he needs a family.
Yeah.
And he is very lonely. In the end of Civil War, Pepper's gone and his crew is gone, and he is sitting there at that desk by himself,
Rhodey
thinking about his mistakes.
In a coma, Rhodey's severely injured.
Yeah, Rhodey's injured. He's not gone. He's injured. He's still there, and so Vision's still there, and Scarlet Witch is still there. We don't see them in those final moments, but
right.
he helps Rhodey in his therapy, and gets a package for Tony Stank.
Yeah.
But then he goes into his office, and it just seems like a really quiet moment of reflection where he's realizing, I went from this sort of big family that I had at the beginning of this movie, and it's all kind of gone down to this very small. There's that scene. The scenes near the beginning of Civil War where Vision's invading Scarlet Witch's room, and they're talking about cooking food for her and all this stuff. Like, there's this real, like, sort of, it's obvious they've all lived together for a while, and they're all kind of have this family vibe going, and now he's lost a huge chunk of the family that he'd been building.
Yeah.
And I think having not just Spider-Man as both a family member and a son figure that he can try to sort of maybe be the man his father wasn't, it's really that's the stuff that interests me, is his connections to his own father, and how he feels his father treated him, and the connections to that, and how he's now treating the young kid, and trying to draw all those connections is what really interests me.
Well, especially because and this is what I hadn't connected before, but with you saying about him being kind of a surrogate father figure, it's like one thing Tony Stark has been trying to do throughout this entire series of movies is to create something. He wants to create a lasting legacy. At first it was, he really thought his company was going to be like the thing he had created that was going to be great for the world. And then it was the suits, and then he saw the suits could go wrong. And then it was Ultron. He was going to create Ultron, and Ultron was going to keep the world safe. And Ultron, they talk about how he has kind of a father-son relationship with Ultron. And so I'm kind of thinking, like, in some ways, Spider-Man is now one more step of this. Now he's sort of being like, okay, I can't build something entirely new, but maybe I can be someone's mentor. Maybe Spider-Man can sort of be my legacy in a way. Do you see any of that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's funny you bring that up. I hadn't thought about that in connection, his connection with his father, and Spider-Man also in the connection to Ultron, which he also had a fatherly relationship with.
Yeah.
I really love how James Spader plays that father-son dynamic.
Yeah.
In Ultron. I was glossing over that completely, but yeah, that's a very interesting correlation. And it's just Tony trying to figure out what a good dad is.
Yeah.
And when to discipline, and seeing Tony in that disciplinary position where he's taking the suit away in Homecoming is weird, because you're so used to Tony being the guy who give everyone the toys and the support they need and let them do their thing.
Yeah, I mean, if Tony's anything, he's a big overgrown child, and Pepper is his kind of like girlfriend. We often joke about the cliche of the kind of guy who needs a girlfriend who's also his mom. I mean, that's absolutely Tony Stark and Pepper Potts.
Absolutely.
And so I think you're right. It's such an interesting shift when now Tony is the one, because there's got to be a part of Tony that's like, let me just see the cool things this kid can do. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And I wonder if this is him having learned some kind of a lesson. So what do you think is going to happen with Tony and Spider-Man going forward? Like, do you think as Spider-Man comes into more of his own, is Tony going to be able to kind of let go and step back and like let the kid leave the nest, like the way a good father hopefully does?
Well, there's a lot of speculation going around right now online, and because of some casting news, and so it's almost hard to answer that without being a little spoilery. And I don't know that it's spoilery; it's just speculation, but it seems like pretty good speculation. It's hard to know because I don't know who's going to survive.
Yeah.
Thanos, and I feel really strongly that Thanos is going to kill somebody.
Yeah.
And so so when I'm going to talk about actual predictions, it's really hard to separate from like. I feel like.
Well, let's not go into predictions then. More in terms of what do you think would happen? What would you want to see happen? What do you think Tony should do as a good dad?
How to be a good dad to Spider-Man. Yeah, it's so funny because he just has this. I love you talked about whether he needs whether Spider-Man wants it or not at one point. You mentioned a second ago, and but maybe Tony needs it. And I think it's funny. One of the things I love about Spider-Man is that he doesn't at all try to hide the fact that he wants a father figure.
Yeah.
When he goes in for that hug from Tony, and he's like, "I'm just reaching for the door.
Yeah.
I'm just letting you out of the car. I was not going in for a hug. Just so you know, this is not a hugging relationship."
Which I mean, if you remember, Tony's father was not affectionate with him in the slightest.
Exactly.
So it makes sense that it would never occur to him, like, if I'm a father figure, some affection's got to be, some reinforcement's got to be part of that.
Yeah, and I think that's what he's making. He's making the same mistakes in some ways that his father did. He is being the disciplinarian, which his father was, and he's being the guy who pushes him to be excellent in the areas that he is talented in, which his father did. But there's no real affection there yet.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem. And in any parenting style, of course, I think what is going to be interesting if we get another Spider-Man movie with a Tony Stark involved, which I hope we do. It'll be interesting now that Aunt May knows.
Yeah.
Because I could absolutely see Aunt May being kind of the surrogate for his mother in the same way that like his mother was encouraging and loving. And this is not just a Tony Stark thing. This is almost every family in the last couple generations. The mothers are overly loving and overly doting, and the fathers are overly disciplinarian. Yeah. And that's just that in our culture, that's the roles that were given out for a while.
Right.
I think that's changing, and it's less true now. But yeah, fathers have been.
Certainly, if Aunt May can take on that role, it would help with because I think the one thing that Tony Stark probably should not do is hit on Aunt May if he's trying to be a good father to Spider-Man. Like, maybe that's something we can stay away from. That's going to cause all kinds of complications, I think, for poor Peter Parker.
Yeah, I definitely think now that Pepper's back, I think there's going to be less of that. I'm sure he'll still call her hot and everything, but mostly just to get on Spider-Man's nerves.
I mean, at some level, Tony's always going to be more of a kind of big brother than a father figure, I think, because he never is going to quite have that full maturity of a father figure.
Right.
So what else are you hoping to see with Tony going forward? Like, what, as we look, and again, not predictions as much as just like what if he has learned lessons from Ultron and Civil War? Like, what would you hope to see? Where would you want to see his character go?
It's interesting. My favorite Tony is the Tony Unleashed.
Yeah.
So if I'm going with what I want him, ethically, what I would want him to do is continue to learn his lessons.
Yeah.
And like be a better man because of the things he's gone through, and like let people into his life that keep him in check, whether it's through actual governmental control. That's a whole question, but at least have people in his life like Cap, like Pepper, like Happy that question him and allow those questions to really resonate.
Yeah.
That is important for Tony to grow as a character. I think that's important. And Aunt May to question his parental style with I
Peter.
keep forgetting Peter Parker's name. How silly is that? I keep wanting to say Tom Holland, which is funny.
Yeah.
I think it's just because I keep thinking specifically of Tom Holland and not all the other Peter Parkers I've known,
We've
since
had
there's so
quite
many
a few,
now.
yeah.
We've had a lot of Peter Parkers. But I'd love to see, that's I think where Tony needs to go is a Tony who is letting people in his life that he trusts.
Yeah.
For more reasons than just they're the government.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really where this comes down, is like, you can't necessarily trust the government. Cap learned that. You can't necessarily just trust yourself. Tony's learned that. You need, maybe this whole thing is about, you need family. You need people close to you and people that can challenge your own ideas. And just, I guess the big ethical takeaway of the Tony Stark storyline is like, the Tony Stark combined with the Captain America storyline is, you need to be open to criticism.
Yeah.
And open to having your mind changed about, ethical and just decisions in general. Your decisions in life, you're not perfect. No one is.
The word that keeps coming to my mind is accountability. As I feel like these
That's
heroes
That's exactly.
Need someone who they, and like to step outside of Marvel for a second, but like, Batman, he seems like he does only his own stuff, but he's accountable to Alfred. He has to talk everything through with Alfred. And like Daredevil, I think this is the difference between Daredevil and the Punisher. Like Daredevil has his priest who he has to like be accountable to, and he has that person he's willing to listen to and say, actually, Matt, you're not quite on the right track here. And I think, and when the Punisher doesn't, to me.
Even then, he doesn't always listen, but he has that.
He has some. Go ahead.
We haven't seen the Punisher in action yet, but he is going to have, at least he has Karen at this point.
That's true.
And it seems, based on this, have you seen the most recent trailer?
I have not, no.
Oh my goodness. Trailer number 2, the official trailer number 2.
Oh wait, is that the one with the Metallica song?
No.
No, that's trailer number 1, okay.
That's trailer number 1. There was like a teaser, then there's trailer number 1. The official trailer number 2 is the one I'm talking about, and it goes a lot more into kind of what the story is going to be, and a little more character development instead of just shoot 'em, bang, 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 Metallica music. And it's super good, but there's a good bit of Karen in there, and him like struggling with what he's doing. And I like that Karen's going to be there, but he also has his teammate.
Well, let's not go into spoilers for that for folks who haven't seen it. But
no. I'm just, it's comics and it's all that stuff. But he has a support structure of sorts. I don't know that they keep him. They definitely don't keep him in check. A lot of what keeps Matt in check is himself. Like he thinks there's a line that he shouldn't cross.
Yeah, he has set. He has set those lines. He has set the rules for himself. He has kind of given himself his own Sokovia Accords in that way. His rules. Yeah,
and Batman's done the same thing.
And so I guess maybe that's what. Yeah, I think I'm with you that with Tony, I feel like Tony and Cap. Tony seems a lot more self-destructive and has obviously caused a lot more destruction. But I have some problems with Cap as well, with Cap's utter assurance in his own sort of moral certitude and his ability, to stand like a tree and all that. And that, what I'm hoping more than anything is that they wind up reconnecting as a team, because I think on some level, not just those two, but all of them, they keep each other accountable. And you're right. I like. In terms of entertainment value, Tony Stark off the hook is hilarious and it's fun to watch.
I would love to see him get super confident again and be that Avengers 1 Tony Stark before he goes into space, where he's utterly confident against an alien army.
Right.
When he's talking to Loki and he's like shaking a drink and talking to Loki. That's still like some of the best Tony Stark there is.
And especially because if he can get to that kind of middle ground of like, I don't need to doubt myself. That's what I've got Cap for. That's what I've got Bruce for. And if they tell me I'm wrong, I'll listen. But anybody else, to hell with it.
I think it'd be better if Bruce was a little more stand-uppy to Stark. Like Bruce gets too excited about the science and like just goes with Stark.
Yeah.
They're science bros, and they just do their science regardless of the consequences. At least that's how it's been thus far. And so hopefully.
And I'll say that, granted, the Thor Ragnarok movie looks like it's going to be mostly 80s heavy metal awesomeness. I'm not expecting too much death, but I would love to, we don't get very much at all of why Bruce left. And I would love to get a little bit more of if it has something to do with his connection with Stark, and if he is feeling even more guilty about Ultron and about the things that happened, and if he's kind of feeling like, maybe I do now need to stand up to Tony more, and I need to kind of push back more. I think it'd be great for Tony. I think it'd be great for Bruce.
Yeah. No. I think that if there's going to be much depth in that movie, it's probably going to come from Bruce.
Yeah.
Because I don't think of Thor as a very depth-filled character, especially the way they're portraying him in these trailers. He is becoming more and more of a silly character, which I think is funny. And yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, but the last time we saw Bruce was right after he helped cause this incident in Sokovia.
Right. And clearly, part of why he's getting away is I think he feels kind of betrayed by, everything that happened with Natasha.
Black Widow.
But yeah, I'd love to see that. So we got almost an hour, and I want to kind of start wrapping up. But is there any last stuff about Tony that we haven't gotten into that you kind of want to cover, or sort of other last ideas about Tony you think are important to throw into the mix?
No, I don't think there's anything that I'm really sitting on. I really felt like when we started to talk about what we were going to talk about with Tony, and I was thinking about it, I was like, man, I feel like I could probably just sum it up in a sentence. I hope we get an hour out of this, but we definitely did. We had a lot of good stuff in there. But really, I think he's just a character that, began with utter self-confidence in both his ethics and his abilities, and has had that slowly taken away from him over the course of these movies. And now he is a character who's not willing to make a decision and sort of second guesses himself. Even with Spider-Man, he's like, here's a suit. No, give me the suit. He's no longer the Tony Stark we knew and loved in the beginning. And I think that's interesting. I love that they have developed his character, but I would love to see, Tony Stark unleashed before the end.
Yeah.
Like, if Tony Stark, all these contracts are getting up and stuff, and like, I don't know what they're going to do, who's going to re-sign, who's going to stick around, who's not. But if Tony sticks around, I really would love to see Tony. I'd love to see that, like, martini shaken Tony standing up to someone as powerful as Thanos. Like, that would just be really great for me.
I mean,
I miss that.
I think you're right, because I think one thing that has happened so well in that first Avengers movie is that, Cap is the heart and soul of the team. He's the heart of the team, and he's the leader of the team and the conscience of the team. But Tony is the face of the team. Tony is the bard. Tony's the one who he's going to go up and talk to Loki because, of his position. I think you're right. That would be a great thing to see. So, good closing point. So, I thank Matt. Thank you again so much for being on this. And I want to give you a chance to talk about some of the other stuff you do. And I want to just say a word myself about the MCUcast, which I want you to talk about and how people can find it. But I just want to say, for anyone who's listening to this, if you haven't found it already, the MCUcast is it's just a great time to sit and listen to two guys who love these properties and who think about these properties so much, dive deep into them. And I want to tell my own quick story with it, which is that a couple of years ago, my mother got very sick. She had cancer. And I was driving back and forth across the country a number of times going to see her. And when I wasn't, I was chatting with my friends about the Marvel movies and what was happening. And on those drives, I desperately wanted to continue that, and that was when I actually found the MCU. And I probably listened to 20 or so back episodes of you guys while I was doing those drives back and forth. And it was just so great because at that time when so much else was going on in my life, I wanted to have that just chance to hear two people talk about everything that was great about some of these movies and everything that wasn't so great. I love the fact that you guys are pretty, you're fanboys obviously, but you're pretty have no problems pulling your punches when we talk about something like an Iron Fist or something that doesn't land quite as well. So talk about the MCU cast and how people can find that.
Well, man, first off, thank you. That means a lot that we could be a part of that, of helping you get through that time. That's huge. We hear that some, and I love that's it, because that's exactly what the show was for me. I loved when I was a kid. When you're a kid, you have all this time on the playground, and like I think of like after church. I had a best friend who I grew up with, and I mentioned to you off air. I don't think we've talked about on the cast. I was a pastor's son, and so they'd have all these meetings and stuff that I wasn't a part of, and me and my friend would walk outside, and we'd like for hours talk about Star Trek, and it's that's just playground conversations that for years we continued doing on the phone, and as you get older, those things just those like just geeking out about what's going to happen and theories and bouncing around and that sort of conversations, they just don't happen near as much. And like I love like realizing an amazing thing could happen and like just buzzing with excitement about what's going to happen in this next movie or what's going to happen in this next series. It's just a fun thing to do. And so that's very much the spirit we started the cast with, was just we're the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast. As I said, I grew up on Star Trek, and Star Trek is where I get my love of continuity from. I love really deep, expansive continuity where you just have, the first thing, it all connects to the last thing, and there's like 6 series and 10 movies. That's Star Trek. And the crazy thing is that it's not there yet, but the Marvel Cinematic Universe is dangerously close to overtaking the amount of time Star Trek has been on screen, like screen hours, just because they've done so many shows now, and all these Netflix shows coming out like a couple a year. They're getting dangerously close to overtaking the number of hours, and they've actually made more movies. There's more Marvel Cinematic Universe movies now than there were Star Trek movies.
That's
which
funny.
Is
I
crazy.
never thought about that. Yeah, but you're right. And
they're up to 13. No. Are they at 13 or 17? I want to say they're like I want to say it's like 13 or 14 movies now.
I think so,
and only 11 Star Trek movies, 10 or 11. Which it's 11.
Yeah, that sounds right. But no,
gotta say it right. Gotta keep my nerd cred over here.
Exactly. And it makes sense to me to hearing that that's where you guys started, because that's exactly what comes across in the podcast. Is it's two guys who love talking about this stuff, but you go into depth with it. So how can people find it if they're not fans already?
Any of the podcatchers that you have, we should be there. Marvel Cinematic Universe Podcast, that's the name. But if you don't see it on your podcatcher, just MCUcast.com is where you can go. And Marvel Cinematic Universe Podcast on your podcatcher, or MCUcast.com in the web browser. Awesome. And that's where we are.
Cool. Well, and thank you, Matt. And I also know you're doing your own project. What's going on with your music? Because I want to get a chance to hear about that.
Love to podcast, but that's really my side thing that I've just been doing a couple of years. My full-time job is I'm a musician, and I play kind of sort of a pop rock sort of thing, and MatthewCarrollmusic.com is where you can go and sign up for the email list and listen to a track or two there on the website. It's a real simple website right now. It's got like one play button where you can listen to a song and like just a thing that says sign up, and like you just sign up for the email list. The bigger website's coming because I'm going through this big. I've never recorded a full length album before. I've recorded a bunch of little like 3-song, 4-song EPs over the years, and this is going to be my first. This is like I've put more work into this album than I've ever put into anything else in my life.
That's awesome, man.
The amount of work and time. I wrote over 80 songs for the record. And then I narrowed those down to my favorite, like 25. And then I demoed all those 25 to the point that the demos were better than anything I'd ever recorded in my life.
That's great.
And those that did those at home. And then I took those demos to a live band and I said, here's the blueprint of what we're doing, but I want to be creative. Then I spent months in the recording studio, not in the recording studio, in a practice space with my band, perfecting those arrangements and coming up with those just cool moments that you don't get from the demo process, where you actually, like, the bassist goes, hey, drummer, what if you pause there? Or like, what if you that little pull and push and pull that you get with a band in an actual room together? So we did months of rehearsals, and then we hit a studio, and the studio is like super. Like the guy who was recording us is actually a guy who's recorded bands like Collective Soul.
Oh wow.
And stuff like that. Yeah, he's legit. He's like really legit. And his studio is really legit, and he has recorded us at much higher level than I've ever done anything in my life at my home studio. Everything I've ever done until now has always been at my home studio, and this one I just decided I'm not going to do that. I'm doing this professionally, and I went in to a professional studio and did it, and spent all of my money, all of my money and all of my time for about a year now has gone to this, and it's almost done.
Yeah.
We're about to launch it, and I'm super excited.
Oh, I can't wait to hear it. And I know we'll make sure we have links to all that stuff in the episode notes, because that album is going to be coming pretty soon. And I know I've heard some of the demos and really excited to hear that. So
yeah, and I should say it's like kind of 90s influenced pop rock, I guess, is like a sort of good. If you like that sort of pop rock 90s stuff, my favorite band's Weezer.
They talk about geek rock. I mean, I'm a huge Weezer fan.
Absolutely. There's at least 2 Marvel references on the album. Uh, one one that's like specifically just for fans of the MCU cast that was like an inside joke for MCU cast people that they might notice.
I'm stepping here into DC. I know again, Cardinal Sin. But do you know the song
Yeah.
Aquaman's Lament?
You know, is that Aqua the Mock?
I'm not sure who sings it. But it's basically all about him being jealous of Batman and trying to convince Vicky Vale that he's so much cooler.
I don't think I know the song myself, but my buddy Dave, who does the DC on Screen podcast,
Yep.
he's a huge fan of a lot of that stuff, and I want to say he's mentioned that one to me before.
That makes sense. I'll send you a link to it because it's got a very kind of Weezer kind of sound, and you'll enjoy it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Matt, so much for being on. This was really great. And to all our listeners,
thank you, Matthew.
Yeah. And to all our listeners, thank you guys for being a part of this. Obviously, Tony Stark has been, he's literally the character who started all of this. People who started the MCU. What are your thoughts on him? What are your thoughts on Iron Man? Is he a hero? Do you see him as an anti-hero? Do you see him as a villain? What do you think about Civil War? And are you much more Team Cap than we were today? Or what do you think about what's going on with him and Spider-Man? Let us know. I would know, Matt, you and I got to know each other because you were great about responding to feedback like that. You can hit us up on Facebook or on Twitter, both of them at Superhero Ethics. And you can also find Matt, I know, on those things under the MCUcast. You can also email us at superheroethics@gmail.com. Would love to get your feedback. Would love to, as Matt was saying, these podcasts, I think for both of us, come out of the fact that we just used to sit around as kids and talk about these things. And I just want to keep those conversations going. So it's great to get to talk to Matt about it, but I love to talk to you guys, the listeners. So tweet at us, Facebook at us, email us. Let us know what you think. Thank you guys all for taking part. Matt, thanks for being a great guest, and have a great day.